Seeking emergency shelter may now be harder for newly arrived migrant families and those already in the state who experience homelessness. Welcome everyone to Western Mass News at 6 on this Friday. I'm Chris Pisano.
And I'm Abby Carnevale. That's after shelters reached full capacity on Thursday. And a wait list has now been officially put in place until space becomes available. Western Mass News reporter Daniel Santiago joins us live in studio with details. Daniel, what can those who are seeking shelter do now?
Well, Chris, Abby, at this point, there's not much they can do really, but State Representative Lindsay Zabadosa is recommending they arm themselves with patience and rely on the kindness of friends and family for temporary shelter.
In Massachusetts, newly arriving migrant families and those already in the state who are experiencing homelessness and may wish to seek emergency shelter are now being placed on a wait list. Since the 7,500 family shelter capacity in the state was reached on Thursday, Western Mass News reached out to Emergency Assistance Director General Scott Rice for answers. And in a statement, he says in part, quote, "We are at the point where we do not have enough shelter units, service providers, or funding to continue to safely expand. If there are no available shelter units, families determined eligible for emergency assistance will be placed on a wait list. Our administration continues to provide arriving families with resources, basic necessities, and support. And we're working with community partners to connect them with safe overnight options." We spoke with State Representative Lindsay Zabadosa on Friday, who tells us the process to join the waitlist is not yet clear. But she shared with us what the recommendation is for anyone who is put on the list and now waiting for shelter space to be available.
So we're not sure of the space that people are going to be sent to in the interim. We do know that people are being asked to stay in the last safe space where they were staying. So whether it was couch surfing or staying with friends or family, people are being asked to do that rather than come into the shelters.
Zabadosa worries the situation could soon worsen with colder temperatures settling in and winter just weeks away, which is usually the busiest time for shelters as it is.
I think we're all really concerned with winter just around the corner. I mean, the truth is that our shelters are generally winter-only shelters in many parts of the state. This year is even more of a struggle because we have a lot of new arrivals who are also competing for those same spaces. So the situation has become much more difficult and much more dire.
State Representative Zabadosa and Governor Maura Healey's administration are urging President Biden and the federal government to act quickly and approve work authorizations to those already in shelters so they can get jobs, leave the shelters, and space can open up for those still arriving every day. Reporting live in studio, Daniel Santiago, Western Mass News.